it out that the sun shines down its power to all the world and makes the wind blow strong as it will. I wonder hope gentle rains can fall upon the land, so lovely earth can stay lovely still.
We should say hello to everybody who has just got on to Channel 8. If we're on Channel 8, we may not be, but...
Well, it depends on how much we have to talk about.
Yeah. We've got stuff to talk about all day. If I think if
Well,
somebody wanted to have a 24-hour discussion of energy and could give us the caffeine pills that would be necessary to do that,
we could do it.
We could probably do it. So what we're talking about here is the fact that in Kansas, where you've got Koch Industries, which is one of the big supporters of organizations like the Heritage Foundation and ALEC and so forth.
Oh, ALEC, that scares me.
Yeah, they have been pushing very hard to get moderate Republicans who had voted in favor of things that they didn't like, right, like affordable health care and renewable energy, out of office and replace them by candidates from the Tea Party. And what has happened as a result of that is that nothing happened. The moderates have stayed in place in Kansas, and the challengers have not replaced them. They have not been. Now this is not a general election. This is a primary election.
Yeah.
So they're going to be up against Democrats.
But they're in strong Republican territory, so they're very likely to win.
They're very likely to win. But if they are defeated, their moderate stand is not going to be replaced by some radical stand, unless, of course, the Democrats are radical. But I don't think there's a whole lot of radical Democrats in Kansas.
I don't think so. An interesting thing in Kansas that we've observed about power is the people seem to be very strongly in favor of renewables.
Yes, and I think this probably played a part in this election.
There's a lot of wind going in Kansas.
There's a lot of wind going in.
It's a good place for it.
It's a good place for wind. And the interesting thing about it, I keep forgetting. I remember this very often. There's a wind farm, and I don't remember whether it's in Kansas or Nebraska, but it's in one of those two states that is supplying something over 100 megawatts of power to a utility in Alabama. So Kansas can sell that wind to the southeast, to Alabama and Georgia and North Carolina and so forth. And given the power lines, if they had the power lines in place, and it is probable that more of them are going to have to be added, but if they had the power lines in place, they could sell that power from Kansas to any state in the continental United States. And actually they could sell the power to Alaska if they just had the power lines in place.
Well, stuff like that is happening. I think it was in Utah, where they built a wind farm.
Yes.
And they have installed their own private power line directly to California.
Wyoming, I think, is the one you're
thinking. Is it Wyoming?
Yeah,
okay.
There's huge wind farms in Wyoming, and they're putting in power lines that go to the southern California
I think they're going to
area.
San Diego.
San Diego.
Yeah.
And if you think about that, that's a long ways. That's not a short distance. But and in fact, it's probably the same distance that they would have to cover if they were selling wind from Wyoming to Chicago. Now, if you think about that, that means that you could have a business that's in Wyoming and sell power to Chicago and San Diego.
Well, you can do it now by computers or
yes,
bookkeeping.
And
we're talking. They're moving the actual electrons.
Yes, that's right. And Kansas and Nebraska and Oklahoma are ideally situated to sell power to anybody because they're right in the middle of the country.
In the middle, and they got a lot of wind.
And they've got a lot of wind. And there is a city in Kansas, Greensburg, Kansas, tiny city, 800 and some odd people, but they brag about the fact that they are supplied with power 100% by wind 100% of the time.
I have some pictures of that, but it would take me.
It would take you
probably
time
too
to get
long
them together.
dig
Yeah.
them up. But yeah, we've talked about that.
We have indeed. And they have, one of the things that's interesting about that particular place is that the city is 1,200 acres. Okay?
Yeah.
They have 14 wind turbines in that 1,200, right in the
Right
city.
in the city. Right
And-
next to the hospital.
Right.
Right next to the school. There's 2 of them next to the schools, I think.
There's 3 at the Arts Center.
The car dealer has 2.
Best Western has 3 to support the electricity for its guests,
Yeah.
who sleep all night through the tremendous sounds of the wind turbines. And it's interesting to see that that's the Kansan attitude toward wind, which is not surprising because they've got, if it's a local, in this particular case, it's the local city with its own wind farm, which is actually outside of the city. So those 14 turbines are in addition to the 10 big turbines they've got outside. They're supplied with power by those wind turbines, and that's okay because the money stays local.
It's not going to Saudi Arabia.
It's not going to Saudi Arabia. It's not going to Pennsylvania, to the Marcella Play or Bakken or any of those. It's going local. And there was an interesting thing about Bakken in today. I don't know if you noticed it, but in the general stuff at the blog, geoharvey.wordpress.com.
I didn't read the blog today.
Okay,
Yeah.
there was a note about. I'm trying to think. Basically the note said that the fossil fuel industry is in trouble because of renewables, and I think the trouble was actually wind power. And the thing that made this interesting to me was that the note came from a publication with the name Bakken, and the publication was a publication for people who were in the oil shale and gas shale business. And they're talking.
So insiders are talking.
The insiders are talking about the fact that they are threatened by wind and solar.
Well, I've heard you talk several times on this show and off this show about, I think in the context I'm thinking of it was solar, but it's applicable to wind too.
Yeah.
Once you've paid the cost of installation off,
Yes,
that power is free.
that's right. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
what was it the African guy said, the rock singer? It's free forever? Or
Yeah,
we just talked about
We
it
talked about it on the regular news show.
today.
Can you get that up again?
I can do.
We may be talking to a different audience here, and it would be nice to tell people what it's about, because that's an important issue. This guy is an African rock star, and I think he's a rock star for more than one reason at this point.
Yeah, that's a good point. Here he is right now.
Okay. We should get that on the screen so that people can get a picture of him.
I gotta get it from here to
Yeah.
here to here.
There you
we
go. People should really watch. We should somehow capture that central screen so that people can see what you're doing. This
We've
guy,
got the central ski.
huh?
Central
No,
screen
I'm
is up.
talking about the whole thing where we've got four different images going up, and you can click on so they can see what you're doing, staring into your camera like a deer is staring into the headlights.
I'm playing around with these things. Well,
They can't see
They
it.
can't see me now.
But that's okay.
Acon.
Here is the guy, and you brought him up. Maybe you should mention him.
Well, these are his quotes. Climate change is real,
Yes,
and Africa stands to suffer the most.
I think that's true.
We can't take the same paradigm that America did, or Europe did, or even China did. We need to look at the conditions of the day and develop according to those conditions. And he's got a new initiative called Acon Lighting Africa, and that's his singing name. That's
Yep.
his pen name or whatever.
Okay.
He hopes to bring electricity. This is incredible. He hopes to bring electricity to a million households by the end of 2014. Well, that's coming up pretty
Okay,
quickly.
yeah. He wants to bring electricity to 1 million households.
He's not doing it all with his own money. He's calling on investors to help
Right,
him.
in the next 4 months.
Well, he's Unless things happen really fast, he's not going to make it in
Well,
2014.
you know, by the way, I should mention something to you. We had guests on the show a couple of weeks ago, a couple of young men, Jake Saper and Thomas Hand, and they achieved their goal of getting 25 heat pumps sold in Brattleboro.
This is air source heat pumps
Air source heat pumps, yes.
for the Brattleboro area
Right.
or the county.
And that meant they had to sell one a day
Yep.
for 25 days.
Good.
Now, at the end of the period, the 25 days, they had not actually sold 25, but they were pretty well convinced that the people that they had who were
They hadn't signed on a dotted line.
they hadn't
yet,
signed on the dotted line, but they would.
They're going to.
So they're actually installing those heat pumps in Brattleboro, and they're keeping that business going, and they're planning on expanding it through the state of Vermont.
Well, it's a great idea.
So here we're, you know, the reason I mention this is because here we're talking about this young man in Africa who has set a very ambitious goal of lighting 1 million households, which I'm figuring must be at least 5 million people by the end of this year. And that just sounds like an absolutely outrageous, but you know, he could pre-package these things.
Yeah,
He could
he's
say,
gonna have to do something
here
like
is
that."
here is your 250 watt panel, here is your 12 volt battery,
Yep.
here are your
Here's your light bulb.
light bulbs that are set to run on 12 volts, and here is your fan that's and maybe here is your radio, or here is your television, or whatever it is, and just say, okay, here it is, have it, and they get handed out from the back of a truck.
Something like that's going to happen.
Yeah.
And it's the way.
And
we
if he can
expect it
do
to
this,
happen.
this is
Yeah.
really inspirational. You know,
This is grassroots.
it's grassroots. That's right. And if this can be done in, where is he? Do you know what country he's in?
I did, but I don't have it down here. He's in West Africa. I know that much.
Okay, I'm betting he's not in Liberia.
I think I'm betting that too.
Well, the reason why I'm saying that is because Liberia is the only country in West Africa which is 100% tropical rainforest.
I didn't know that.
Yeah. My brother lived there for
I
many
did not
years,
know that.
and
Yeah.
you know, he pointed that out to me. There's tropical rainforest in the rest, but this fellow might be in Sierra Leone, or I think more likely Ghana. Yeah.
I would say Ghana probably.
Yeah, he might be in Burkina Faso.
That's a possibility.
Yeah, which has the kind of stunning name for its capital is Ouagadougou.
He's got a good quote here. We said it before, I'll say it again. Africa will never run out of sun.
That's true.
Our energy is right there in front of us. Why not use it?
Absolutely. Why would they pay somebody to sell them coal when they can pay themselves to get sunlight? And those solar panels are just going to sit there making electricity until they're broken. And that's going to take a long time unless things go really bad.
Yep.
He
might be from Nigeria, because there's a reference at the end of this article to Nigeria.
Yeah. Although Nigeria is not in West Africa.
It isn't?
No, I don't think so.
Oh, okay.
Nigeria. Maybe it is, and I'm thinking of of things differently. But I think of Nigeria as not being in West Africa. Niger is, but they're not.
Niger.
Niger. Okay. I
knew somebody from there.
I stand corrected. Okay.
No, she really was Peace Corps but she was Peace Corps there. So.
I had a friend who was in the Peace Corps, and he told me something interesting about the Peace Corps.
Yeah.
He said, people in the Peace Corps generally go to 3 different places. They go to Africa, they go to Asia, or they go to South America.
Okay.
That shouldn't be a surprise. He said they come back different than they were when they left.
Okay.
The ones who go to South America come back radicals. The ones who go to Asia come back spiritual, and the ones who go to Africa come back laughing.
Okay.
What can you say about that? He, by the way, went to Asia.
Uh-huh. That's an interesting way of looking at it, really.
People in Africa apparently laugh quite a lot. They enjoy laughing. And Cambodians do too, but, you know.
Yeah.
So, wind power, this guy was talking about solar power in Africa. And solar power is really available practically all over the world. But the Africans could just as easily get wind power. And they're starting to promote that more and more as time goes by. I mean, South Africa is getting very aggressive about installing solar power.
Yes, they are.
And they're also putting in wind farms.
Well, the wind power potential of the world
Is huge.
is huge. I mean, for centuries, wind power powered transportation across the oceans.
Yeah,
The trade winds.
absolutely.
They blow all the time.
Just think about that. Ships being moved by wind power. That's the way the world was done.
You know, and I've seen some articles, pop science kind of articles
Yes.
about modern day tankers and freighters being propelled by wind.
Well, there was an article in the news this week which didn't make it into the articles that I read for Energy Week, but it was about a ferry boat, large ferry boat in Greece, which of course has a lot of ferry boats because they've got a lot of islands.
Yeah.
And that ferry boat is renewable powered. And the reason why they built the ferry boat was because they wanted to test a system that they had designed with the idea that it was going to be used in general ocean transportation.
Okay.
Now, ocean
transportation, yeah.
transportation is interesting. Of course, this would be solar powered, not wind powered primarily, or at least I should say it may be solar and wind hybrid.
That's a possibility. I was just going to mention something like
Yeah.
that,
But
finish up.
When you think about it, I knew a guy who ran an importing business in central New Jersey, and he was really kind of stunned when he ordered some stone lanterns from Tokyo, and he had them shipped to Port Newark and then trucked to central New Jersey, and the shipping costs from Tokyo to Port Newark were lower than the trucking costs from Port Newark.
I knew you were going
35
to say
miles.
that.
And if you think about a second item, and this is something that most people are very much unaware of, and it is important. The ships at sea are not regulated for their emissions by anybody.
By anybody, yeah.
And or at least most of them. It may depend upon where the ships are registered. But ships are registered where it's cheapest to register.
Absolutely.
And which is why, for years, the largest merchant marine in the world was Liberia, because that was the easiest country to. And
I think there's some ships that are registered by countries that are totally landlocked.
I wouldn't be at all surprised. But there is such a thing as the Swiss Navy.
Yeah, yeah.
And I'm not sure what they do, but
I bet they party a lot.
I don't know. But those ships have horrible emissions, just horrible emissions.
Yeah, yeah.
And they are a big problem. And when you consider, for example, that the United Nations is really getting active on the subject of air pollution, global warming, climate change, and that sort of thing. You would think that we would be moving faster toward regulating some of these things.
Well, I would think just by pure economics, as the price of fossil fuels increases, it is going to become evident to the people who own these things that it'll be cheaper for them to run them on wind again.
Well, yes, that is, now we're back to the business of the ferry boat in Greece and the question of running by wind. The thing that you give up when you ship from Tokyo to Port Newark, or from any place to any place by ocean, is speed, because ocean transportation.
But you can deal with that.
You can deal with it. And if you think about a ship that's moving at 7 knots or something like that, it sounds like it's horribly slow. That's about
It
nine
is, for
nine
so
miles
much.
an hour, but it's running 24 hours a day. It
Yeah.
doesn't slow down and stop at a rest stop, and so it takes time. As a matter of fact, one thing that a lot of people don't realize, you remember the gas crisis of 1973,
Yeah.
which is called the crisis. The cause is said to be the Arab oil embargo. The last tankers to leave the Middle East arrived at the United States after the gas crisis was over, because
Okay.
it took several months to
Yeah,
get
yeah,
to
yeah,
the United
yeah,
States. So where did the Arab oil embargo impinge on the gas crisis? Well, it did actually. It put everybody into a panic. But those people at that time who were behind the oil embargo, I think, and I think I'm not alone in this, looked at the situation and said, the United States has peaked its oil output in 1970, and their output is declining. They hit a crisis in home heating fuels in 1972, in the spring of 1973, and they're going to hit another crisis for gasoline in 1973. And we, meaning the Arabs, who are behind this, and the other people who are behind it, want to be in a position to be able to take the political credit for that. Mm-hmm. So we'll start an embargo, mm-hmm. which they could very easily tie to a war in Israel, mm-hmm. and they did that. And there are a lot of people. If you go to Wikipedia and look at the information on the gas crisis, you find that they talk about it right there in Wikipedia. And as a matter of fact, in the spring of 1973, in April, there was a snowstorm that hit Denver, and it was a blizzard in April, and it shut down all the roads going into Denver. Mm-hmm. And in a 48-hour period, every retailer and every wholesaler in Denver ran out of oil.
Ran out of fuel, yeah.
And I heard that on the radio, and I knew that the United States had already hit peak oil production and was in a decline. And I said, our consumption's going up, our supply is going down. And this is a situation where every company that supplies oil to Denver had made exactly the same decision, which was to convert from home heating fuel to gasoline in April, even though this kind of thing could happen. And I thought to myself, that does not bode well. And so I started...
So what you're saying is a lot of people acting independently all screwed up.
That's right, for the same reason.
For the same reason.
And I sat there and I said to the guy sitting next to me at the place where I was working, we're going to have a gas crisis.
Yeah.
Price of gasoline is going to hit 99.9 cents per gallon.
Oh my God.
And he said, how do you come to that? And I said, because that's the highest price they can put on a pump.
Yeah, right.
Without changing the mechanism in the pump. And so it turned out I was right. And the guys that I was working with just couldn't figure out how I could put that 2 and another 2 together and come up with 4. Because they all said for weeks after that I was crazy, because I had figured this out and was setting up my life to deal with the inflation that would follow, and with a gas crisis that would follow, and getting myself a very nice car that was inexpensive and mm-hmm. used. Mm-hmm. It was. Mm-hmm. I bought a used TR3, Triumph TR3.
Oh, that's a neat little car.
It's a neat little car.
I like that.
I bought that car for $175.
You stole that one?
No.
Was it running?
It was running, and the guy who owned it really wasn't thrilled by it.
Yeah.
He had a Shelby. What was the Shelby
Cobra?
model? No, it wasn't a Cobra. It was the other model. The
Mustang?
Mustang. It was a Shelby Mustang. And he loved the Shelby Mustang, but he also had a TR3.
much more comfortable car than a TR3.
Oh, a TR3 was so tinny it was crazy. Yeah, but it was fun.
Yeah, that was the word.
But I sat there and I thought to myself, people who like fast cars, not that the TR3 was fast, but people who like sporty cars, are going to be looking for a thing like this when the price of fuel goes up and it starts to get very expensive to drive your Corvette. I bought the car for $175 and I sold it a year and a half later for $500, which meant that I had paid for everything that I ever put into that car, which I drove 10,000 miles, except for the cost of the gasoline. And that included the insurance and repairs and everything, oil changes, everything. So I was pretty happy with that. But you know, it's a matter of looking at the news, keeping the news in mind, and figuring out where you're going to go. And today I'm looking at the news, and what I'm seeing is wind power is a big problem for the fossil fuel industry.
Well, yeah, it is.
And
as we've already spoken, the wind is free.
the wind is free.
Eventually, that will dominate.
Yes, the sun is free.
These are going to dominate.
They are. And
Just forgetting about the environment, just for pure economic reasons.
yeah. So the fossil fuel industry is trying to do whatever it can to delay that inevitability. And one of the things they're doing, and they may be doing it in their own minds, is denying that it's ever going to happen, or at least in their lifetimes.
Yeah, they're doing a good job of that.
Well, they're not getting people elected in Kansas, are they?
No, they aren't.
And in case we haven't mentioned it in this show so far, the Kansas legislature, I think it's the Kansas legislature, they said senators, and I don't remember, I think it was senators in the Kansas legislature, moderate senators in the Kansas legislature, all had very conservative, reactionary, in fact, people running against them because they were behind Obama's health care.
We mentioned that today.
Yeah,
We mentioned exactly that.
and
today.
the renewable power and things like that. And of course, these people were
They
financed.
supported his radical ideas.
Yes, these radical ideas that they supported were opposed by organizations like Koch Industries and
Exactly.
ALEC, the American Legislative Exchange Council, and so forth. And there's a reason for that. And of course, those same organizations are willing to support people all over the country who are doing the same thing. And that so far, what they have done is they've put a moratorium on expanding the renewable energy goals for Ohio.
Mm-hmm.
They've tried in every state that had goals.
Mm-hmm.
So they've been successful in 3.5%
They will
of.
be successful in places for a while.
For a while.
In the long run, they're going to lose out just because the people are getting smart.
Well, I think
This
that's
is
true.
not this is not to the benefit of the people anywhere.
I would absolutely agree with that. For the benefit of the people, you know, one of the things that I keep coming back to, and I just keep coming back to, and is in Vermont, we have lots of streams and rivers that you can fish in.
But you can't eat fish.
But you can't eat the fish. You have to check to make sure that that stream or that river or that lake has got mercury-free water. And some of them,
Now, how much does that cost us?
the fishing,
The fact that you can't eat the fish.
I don't, honestly, in dollars and
know.
cents, I don't know what the
I don't
number
know
is.
if that number even well, the number must exist, but I don't know if anybody knows it.
It's quite possible that nobody does.
Yeah.
But just the fact that you have to check
Yeah.
is really kind of appalling when you consider that this is stuff, the mercury that is causing this came from people who are in Ohio and Pennsylvania, New York, Indiana, Michigan, Illinois. And they came from utilities which were destroying our rivers, destroying our other water
Destroying
systems.
our rivers, not theirs.
Yes, that's right. And, you know, they did it without our permission. They did it without benefiting us. They did it without any promise that they were going to clean it up. And if you went to them and said, I want you to clean this up, you've been making this mess for years and years and years, clean it up, they would just laugh.
Yeah.
And if you could actually press that to the point where they would have to clean it up, they'd go out of business, go bankrupt, go home, and that'd be the end of that.
I think you're right.
Well, That's the way American business works. They don't take responsibility for the messes they make. If it had been my next door neighbor dumping trash in my backyard, and I could had pictures of it, I could go to court and I could say, I want that person to clean that up. And the court would say, you have to clean that up to the other person. That's what I would expect anyway.
Well, it's a good business model. It's called privatize the profits and socialize the losses.
Yeah. Let's explain that one. In case anybody doesn't get it, it means that a small group of people who own these businesses, privatized,
they keep the money.
They keep the money. The losses, which is the mess that they make, is socialized, which means that everybody...
Picked up by the public.
It's picked up by the public.
Indirectly or directly, it's the public.
Well, you know, the number of people in the United States who are dying of respiratory disease because of fossil fuels is very, very large. It's in the tens of thousands every year.
And that affects the premiums you pay for your health insurance everywhere.
Does. Everybody.
So everybody is paying for...
Right. And if you happen to be a person who owns a lot of money in a fossil fuel industry, it may be that the dividends that you get are very much smaller than the excess, than the extra amounts that you're paying for health care. But
nobody thinks of that.
Yeah. But those people who don't have to worry about health care are the same people who are saying that they don't want to pay for anybody else's health care. And those other people are the people who are suffering because of their actions.
Yeah.
This is really, from a social point of view, from a political point of view, it's reprehensible.
Yeah, it is.
But it happens, and the reason why it happens is because we have a model that is dependent upon an 18th, 19th century design that says if you're tanning leather and you have waste chemicals and you need to get rid of them,
dump it in the river.
You dump it in the river.
Yeah.
And if somebody downriver is unable to fish,
that's their problem.
That's their problem.
Unfortunately.
And the reason why they could do that was because within a couple of miles, the small, the few gallons of waste that you were putting into the river got dissipated, and so nobody noticed.
But it's not true anymore.
It's not true anymore. It's not just the rivers that are suffering, it's the oceans that are suffering.
Yeah.
There are huge areas of the Gulf of Mexico that have no fish in them because of runoff from agricultural properties in North and South Dakota. Well, it's the rest of the Midwest, but
as far away as North and South Dakota.
Yeah, and so we as consumers are paying extra for just ignoring the environmental damage, the fact that we don't want to have dead water all over the place. We're paying extra for food, for fish, because of the pollution that's caused by runoff from fertilizers. And you could make the argument that the fertilizers grow more food. But honestly, I don't...
In the long run, is where does the beam balance?
Yes, it's a question.
And nobody's looking at that. Or if they are, they don't have the power to change anything.
I think that's true. But, one of the things that I've been concerned about in the last couple of days has been the opposition to wind that we see in Vermont. Mm-hmm. And, I think there actually is a point there that we should address, and that is the idea that wind and solar are intermittent.
Well, they are, but so what?
Yeah, so what? Nuclear is intermittent. Coal is intermittent. Natural gas is intermittent.
Absolutely.
And
it's
so
just a different cycle of intermittency.
It's also a different magnitude.
And it's a different magnitude, yep, and time scale.
And we've talked about this, but this is one of the biggest problems that's brought up with renewables. And yet we talked about, when was it last time that we noted that on a $128 average electric bill in the state of Texas, the amount of money that was needed to pay for the intermittency of for covering the intermittency of solar and wind was 4.5 cents.
4 cents, yep.
And the amount of money that was needed to cover the cost of intermittency and baseload power was 75 cents.
Yep.
Now, I did some thinking about that, and I thought, well, you know, just in fairness, let's compare apples with apples instead of apples with oranges. We have to consider 4.5 cents for the portion that wind and solar produce in the average electric bill,
okay,
versus 75 cents for the portion that
okay,
is in the average of fossil fuels and nuclear in the average Texas electric bill. Well, we know that about 1/3 of the people in Texas are paying extra for renewable power.
Well, that's been stated. I'm not sure we know it.
Okay, we have been told this. Maybe it's wrong, but the amount of renewable power in Texas, if Texas were, and it isn't, an indicator for that was if the portion was the same as the rest of the country, they'd be getting about 14 to 15% of their power from renewables. Mm-hmm. And they would be getting something about a little bit in excess of that from nuclear. If we just say that it's 15% from renewable, 15% from nuclear, and 70% from fossil fuels, then their fossil fuel resource would be 4 2/3 times as big as their renewable resource. So you would expect, if you were actually paying the same amount for both, that the amount that they would pay for covering the intermittent behavior of fossil fuels would be 4.5 times what they're paying for fossil fuels, for renewables. Mm-hmm. But it isn't. It's 17 times. Mm-hmm. So it's actually
something's going on.
Something's going on, and it turns out, you know, if you just do a quick mental calculation, it means that the cost of covering for fossil fuels is something on the order of 4 times as great as the cost of, I shouldn't say fossil fuels, for baseload power. Something on the order of 4 times as great as and I shouldn't have, you know, as I think about it, I shouldn't have excluded nuclear there.
Yeah.
So I should have said 8.5, 85% and 15%. So we're talking 5 2/3 rather than 4 2/3. So it's 5 2/3 taken to 17 as opposed to 4. So it's 3 times as much. Even so, the cost of covering for the intermittency of baseload power is 3 times as great as the cost of covering for the intermittency of solar and wind.
Well, that puts a different slant on things.
Doesn't it?
And there's a whole nother slant that we're not even looking at yet.
Yes.
And that is the technology of storage.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Which is growing by leaps and bounds.
Yes.
And it's becoming utilized by leaps and bounds.
Right.
And when you got sufficient storage, intermittency doesn't even amount to a hill of beans.
Interestingly enough, we're back to the storage at Northfield Mountain. We keep going back to Northfield Mountain. We have to go down to Northfield Mountain. We can't do it this coming week because I got work to do for Green Energy Times.
You used to do it in the full foliage season when it's real pretty down there.
It would be, but I would like, maybe we should go down twice.
Yeah, why not? It's not that far. I was
it's not that far.
Yesterday. You know. I was 5 miles away from it.
Yeah. The Northfield Mountain plant was put there because of the problems with the bad match for grid demand that was produced by baseload power plants. Baseload power plants are a terrible match for grid demand, and so you build what was a 500 and some megawatt power plant for Mount Yankee, which was later upgraded to 640 megawatts, and in order to cover for the bad match of the grid demand of that and other similar stations, they put in a station that was about roughly twice as big in terms of its maximum output.
Yeah, yeah. Well, there was other power that they wanted to tap.
Yeah, and so the business of storage is not something that relates to solar and wind alone.
And that's old technology. That's been around for
old technology
since the turn of the last century.
Yes.
I mean, it's been pumped storage. Niagara Falls has been pumped storage.
Yes.
I mean, it's not exactly the same thing. I mean, but they shut the falls off at night.
Yes.
For all intents and purposes, there's no water coming over those falls at night. but during the day they're beautiful.
Yeah.
And that's by design. I mean, they know what they're doing.
Yeah. Pump storage was used in Germany in the 1930s.
I can believe that,
basically the modern
Yeah.
pump storage. And of course,
There's another pump storage plant in Romass, which is right on the Vermont border.
okay, I
down
didn't know
south
that.
of Wilmington.
Okay.
And the Somerset generating station, which you can see along Route 9, you might have noticed a huge worm-like structure that goes along the side of the road. It's an aqueduct,
Really?
and it's being fed by a reservoir up in Somerset.
Okay.
And that would seem to me to be usable as pump storage. They're not using it, but it would seem to me that they could pump water back up into that reservoir and use it at night, or use it when they need it.
That's possible.
It
The
would seem they
turbines,
wouldn't have to do much in a way of modification.
yeah, the turbines in Northfield, when the Northfield Mountain Station was put online,
Yeah.
were the largest turbines in the world
At that time?
at
Yeah, I
that
can believe
time.
it.
Yeah.
Well,
And
their turbines work as motors. It's the
they
same
do,
thing goes
absolutely.
backwards.
Yeah.
I'm sure the one in Somerset is
I'm
only one
speaking
way.
of the water turbines, not the electric turbines. The water turbines. You said the turbines act as motors. They act as pumps.
Yeah,
They
well, that's
act-
what I mean. Yeah, it's
okay, okay.
the same thing.
All right, yes.
When the water's going this way, it generates electricity.
When it goes
When
the other
water
way,
goes the other way, you put electricity into
Yeah.
it, but it's the same machine.
yeah, and it's interesting to see that too, because if you look at the Energy Information Agency and its evaluation of various technologies and the amount of power they produce, they don't tell you how much power is produced by pump storage systems. They tell you how much power is consumed, the net consumption, because it always produces less power during the daytime than it used the previous night, or
Well, yeah.
on average. But that's the way batteries are. It's the nature of storage.
Yeah.
But at the same time, it means that you can, in the case of the Northfield Mountain, you could have a couple of nuclear power plants or coal power plants or whatever at the time that was built, putting electricity into it at night, and then instead of having 3 or 4 plants running during the daytime, you could have those two plants or so running. And so what you're doing is you're saving a baseload power plant, or even more, from having to run all night.
It's probably very true. Yeah. it
And
probably is.
that produces that system where you're losing power but you're making money.
Yep.
And so all of these things you have to look at from the point of view of how
economics.
much of economics.
Yeah.
Yes. If I go to an average person and I say solar power is inefficient, you're only going to get 20% of the light turned to electricity.
Yeah.
That sounds bad.
It does.
Okay. If I go to the person and say, but it lowers your power bill, that sounds good.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's how you frame these things.
It's how you frame it. And when you're dealing with efficiency, or you're dealing with intermittency, or whatever, you can make anything sound bad. Really.
Absolutely.
Except
and there are
heat
people
pumps.
doing exactly that.
Except heat pumps. Heat pumps are hard to
you
make
can figure
sound
out
bad.
some way to make them sound bad too.
Well, the thing about heat pumps that's so much fun is the comparison, and it tells you a lot about efficiency. I tell people, when you hear somebody talk about efficiency, you have to make sure what those numbers mean, because they can mean something
They can mean
radically
something,
different.
yep.
Okay, a space heater, a resistance space heater, what's the efficiency?
97, 98, 100%.
100%. 100% of the electricity that's used by that space heater is converted into.
Even the losses in the cord.
That's
warm-
right.
Warmed up the room.
That's exactly right. And so, the old saw about nothing operates at 100% efficiency happens to be untrue, because an electric space heater does operate at 100% efficiency. So, okay, if you put in a heat pump, the same amount of electricity that you use in that space heater will produce 3 or 4 times as much heat. So if you're getting 100% efficiency out of the space heater, what's the efficiency of the heat pump? 300%, 400%?
Can't be. Not possible.
But it's
But it is.
stated that way.
Yeah.
And from the point of view of physics, it's really easy to understand because the efficiency of producing heat is lower than the efficiency of moving heat.
Okay.
So a heat pump operates at a higher efficiency than the space heater.
Well, there is already heat in cold air.
Yeah, absolutely. When
If
you
you're
compare it
talking
with
about
absolute zero,
there's a lot of heat out there.
Yeah, and if you look at empty space, the temperature of it, not everywhere, but most of empty space is going to be about 3 degrees Kelvin.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't remember what boiling water or freezing water, the temperature of that is in Kelvin. Do you?
I don't remember, no.
But it's a couple hundred
yeah.
degrees. So you're talking about, if you're talking about moving heat from 0 degrees outside to 70 degrees inside Fahrenheit, what you're talking about is moving heat from, let's say, 230 degrees Kelvin to 250 degrees Kelvin, which
is not much
difference.
Mm-hmm.
From the point of view of how we feel, how our skin feels when we're hit with those temperatures, it's a huge difference.
Mm-hmm.
But from the point of view of physics, it's not a huge difference.
Correct.
So you can operate a heat pump. And, I talked to a fellow who was an engineer, a very nice guy, at Vermont Yankee, and I asked him, how efficient is Vermont Yankee? And he said it's 37% efficient, or something like that. It might have been 39% or 36%, but it was something in that range. And he said, but that doesn't sound very good, but the fact is, nothing you do generating electricity is going to be much better than that if it's a conventional thermal power plant, because of the nature of thermodynamics. Okay, how do you compare that with a solar panel that's operating at 20%? It's not the same thing. I said to the guy, you know what? I don't agree with you that it's 37% efficient. And he said, what do you mean? And I said, I would say put its efficiency at under 1%. And he said, how do you figure that? And I said, because you've got fuel. Some of that fuel is converted to electricity. The amount of fuel that can be converted
is very low.
Becomes electricity.
Yeah.
If you're talking about mass, it's a tiny fraction.
Yeah.
It's way below 1%. But the amount of fuel that is actually converted is about 2 or 3%, and the efficiency of that conversion is down around 30 some odd percent. So the result is you're talking about less than 1% efficiency.
Yeah.
Again, when you're talking about efficiency, you have to be comparing apples
with
apples.
Yep.
And if we were talking about the mass and what percentage of the mass is converted into electricity, I don't know what it would be, but I would bet that it would be 0.001% or something like that.
Yeah.
Because when that uranium atom breaks into two pieces, you've got kind of random atoms that come out of there. But they have probably 97 or 98% of the mass of the original uranium atom, which means that you're converting
and you're losing all that. They're going off into space.
You're using 3% of the fuel, but you're only using 3% of the mass of that 3% of the fuel, and then you're producing 30% of 37% of that. It gets turned into. This is a very small amount, as opposed to a solar panel, where the light that's falling on it, 20% of that is converted into solar power. So what does that mean? It means that the solar panel, in terms of efficiency, is very efficient compared to a nuclear power plant.
Well, it's certainly one way of looking at it.
It's a way of looking at it, and it's comparing apples with oranges. So I've got to be fair about it and say that's what it is.
There were a couple of seconds there, a while back, I was kind of lost. I was looking for something on my thumb drive, and it's not here.
Oh, okay.
I have a nice file on wind power for ships.
Okay.
And I was looking for that, hoping I could bring it up.
Okay.
It's on my computer at home.
Is that the one that shows a ship with airplane wing type sails and solar panels?
Yeah. That's in there. There's also a picture of a modern-day windjammer, modern-day wind-powered ship that's used as an excursion boat or for cruises.
Right.
You know, and college kids run up and down like the old-time sailors did and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And the one that you mentioned, I was particularly looking for that one. It's a ferry boat in Sydney.
Okay.
And the solar panels are also sails.
Oh, yes, I remember that.
They turn up, they go vertically, they turn with the wind, and there's a computer that turns them so that it totally maximizes the inputs from the
Both
sun and the wind.
simultaneously.
Yeah.
Isn't that bright?
It's a fabulous thought.
Yeah. I wonder how fast.
And it's in operation. It's in Sydney Harbor.
I wonder how fast a crossing of the Atlantic Ocean you could accomplish with a thing like that.
I don't know.
No,
but
really.
The old clipper ships cross the Atlantic about as fast as a modern day liner does.
Well, I don't know that there is such a thing as a modern day liner.
There's still a couple of the Queens floating around.
Yeah, but are they really modern day?
Well, it's 1950s, 1960s. Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
To me, that's modern.
Yeah, okay, I'll buy that.
But yeah, some of these potential tankers that'll be wind powered are modern day. I mean, they haven't even been built yet. But I think that
truly remarkable.
They will, just because it makes economic sense.
Well, it makes perfect economic sense. You don't have to fuel these things.
Bingo.
But of course,
you catch on quick.
Yeah, the amount of fuel that you need for a ship,
it's enormous.
It's enormous, but it's small compared to what you need for an airplane.
That's true too.
So, you know, a long time ago, being the economically, ecologically oriented person that I am, I decided that the next time I decide to take an extensive vacation in Europe, I will try to go there and come back on ship, because it's much more fun. And
I've been told you can ride on a freighter, and it's luxury all the way. I mean, these guys eat well.
Yeah, if you have to check out the freighter and make sure that it's a good freighter.
I think you're right there.
But yeah, if you're a guest on a paying guest on a freighter, not a stowaway, a paying guest.
A paying guest, yeah.
You dine at the captain's table.
Yep, yeah.
That's what I've been told. There's not a lot of dancing at night, though.
I think you're right about that.
Their swimming pool will tend to be small.
By the light of the moon.
Yeah, the swimming pool tends to be small. But you know, and the other thing is that the costs, I have been told, are relatively low. But you know, as you said, you need to have a particular kind of mindset to do that. You need to be a person who doesn't mind that there's no party going on.
Absolutely, yeah, yeah.
A person who likes to sit in a deck chair and read a book. But you know, there are a lot of people in this world who are like that. So
well, we're about out of time on our second hour.
We're running out of time. Okay, well, we should probably say goodbye to everybody.
Goodbye, everybody.
Goodbye from Tom Finnell, and you just got that. And goodbye from George Harvey.
We spin and we toil, we work all day, sowing and reaping, we store goods away, so we can be dressed well on the day that we die. We dig and drill and waste what we find, break up the earth, leaving little behind, but we will grow lilies in the by and by. I want to point out that the sun shines down its power to all the world and makes the wind blow strong as it will. I want to hope gentle rains can fall upon the land, so lovely earth can stay lovely still.